So today, we're taking a deep dive into a really remarkable story. We're heading to Karauli, a district in eastern Rajasthan, India.
Right, and you really have to picture it relentless. Sun, baked earth, water there isn't just, nice to have. It's everything, a treasure.
Absolutely. And this region, it has this long, harsh history of drought, generations of it.
hmm
And maybe more surprisingly for some, also a history tangled up with banditry.
Yeah, that's a key part of the picture. If you think back to the early 2000s in Karauli, well, it was pretty bleak environmentally.
How bleak are we talking?
We're talking rivers, like the Shambal and Gambhir, often just being these wide, sandy trails, not flowing rivers.
Right.
And the wells, the community lifelines, they were failing. Groundwater levels had plummeted something like 60% just between 1990 and 2010.
60%? That's huge.
It's massive. And by 2015, it got even worse, over 80%. So like 4 out of every 5 wells were basically unusable.
Yeah, and you can only imagine the impact on people's lives, especially farming.
Oh, absolutely devastating. Agriculture was and is the main livelihood. So when the wheat and mustard crops, their staples, started failing year after year, well, it led to terrible hardship.
Which then forced people to leave.
Exactly. You saw this migration starting, families having to abandon villages their ancestors had lived in for generations, just searching for water, for work, for any kind of future.
And layered on top of this environmental disaster was this issue of lawlessness you mentioned. Dacoity, banditry.
Yeah, it adds this whole other complex dimension. Karauli had this reputation. And you see this pattern sometimes, right? When resources get incredibly scarce and people are desperate.
Social order can fray.
It can. And unfortunately, it sometimes creates fertile ground for crime, for insecurity. It becomes this vicious cycle. Scarcity breeding insecurity, insecurity making it harder to cope with scarcity.
And this is where the story really takes a turn.
Yeah.
Something incredible started to happen. Not from the outside in, but from the community itself.
Yeah. That's the key. This wasn't about big NGOs or government plans, not initially anyway. This was about the women of Karauli.
And they weren't fighting the bandits with weapons. Their fight was against the drought itself. Their weapons were determination and, well, knowledge.
Yeah, the seeds were really sown in the early 2010s. Women in one area, Musalpur, basically decided enough is enough, we can't wait.
So they organized.
They did. They formed something called the Mahila Jal Biradari, which translates to the Women's Water Community, a completely grassroots effort.
Driven by necessity.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Born from necessity and this deep understanding of their land, their environment, and actually their history.
And there was a key figure, right? Radha Devi.
Yes, Radha Devi, a farmer's wife. Her resolve, her vision really became a catalyst. She helped rally people.
And what was so striking was their approach. It wasn't about looking for some miracle cure from outside.
Not at all. It was incredibly practical. They looked inwards, backwards almost, to the wisdom passed down through generations, traditional methods of managing water.
The things their ancestors would have known.
Precisely. Techniques for harvesting rainwater, for conserving every drop, things that had perhaps been forgotten or fallen out of use.
So that's what we really want to dig into today. How? How did these women manage to turn things around so dramatically?
Yeah, what were the specific methods? What do they actually do on the ground?
And what challenges did they face?
Yeah.
Because it couldn't have been easy.
Definitely not. And what can we learn from their success? What does it tell us about community power, especially when facing these huge environmental crises, not just in India, but, globally?
Okay, so this initiative starts in Musalpur with the Mahila Jal Biradari. But it didn't just stay there.
No, it caught fire, really. By 2013, just a couple of years later, it wasn't just one village. This network, this idea had spread to over 50 villages.
50. That's rapid growth.
Incredible energy. You had women across all these communities mobilizing, and they were doing the hard work building johads.
Explain johads again.
They're these traditional rainwater harvesting structures. Basically, earthen dams or ponds designed to capture monsoon runoff, hold it, and let it slowly seep into the ground, recharging the groundwater.
Okay. Simple but effective.
Very. And they were also building check dams across smaller streams and gullies, again, to slow down the water flow, prevent erosion, and help infiltration.
And reviving old structures, too.
Yes! That's another fascinating part. They started restoring these ancient stepwells, baoris, these incredible, often ornate structures that go deep into the earth with steps leading down to the water. Many had fallen into ruin.
So bringing history back to life, essentially.
Exactly, bringing these marvels of traditional engineering back into use. Painstaking work, but vital.
And the results, did all this effort actually make a difference to the water levels?
Oh, undeniably. The impact was measurable and, well, quite profound. Just in Masalpur, where it started, by 2015, they saw groundwater levels rise by 2 meters.
2 meters is significant.
It is, and that was just the beginning. Looking across the whole district, by 2023, the average increase in groundwater levels was about 3.5 meters.
Wow. So
Wow.
wells that were dry.
Started having water again. Hand pumps worked for longer. It brought back a sense of security, of possibility to daily life, and crucially for farming.
Right, let's talk about the impact on agriculture, because that was the core livelihood threatened.
The turnaround was dramatic there, too. By 2023, official reports showed wheat yields were up by 25%.
25%.
And mustard, another key crop, saw yields jump by 30%.
That's the difference between facing hunger and having food security, having an income.
Absolutely. It meant livelihoods were being rebuilt. Families could sustain themselves again. And this wasn't just a few people. Tens of thousands of women were actively involved, directly benefiting.
And it's important, isn't it, to remember the individual stories behind those numbers.
So important. These statistics represent real lives changed. Take someone like Kamlabai. A widow struggling, even finding firewood was a daily battle. Through getting involved with the Mahila Jal Biradari, she not only got access to water closer to home, but she became a leader. She mobilized other women in her village for conservation work. It completely changed her standing, her future.
That's incredible.
Or think of a young woman, Priya. Her family's farm was revived because the water came back. And that stability, it meant she could go to school, get an education, something unthinkable just a few years before.
So it's not just about water, it's about empowerment, education, opportunity.
It ripples outwards. It touched every aspect of life.
But as you said, it surely wasn't easy. What kind of obstacles did they run into?
Well, first off, you're dealing with Mother Nature. The monsoons are unpredictable. I know there was a particularly weak monsoon back in 2017.
Right. So you build these structures and then not enough rain comes.
Exactly. And that can lead to disappointment, maybe some skepticism returning, like, is this really working?
Yeah.
Maintaining morale through those periods is tough.
And bureaucracy. Dealing with officials must have been a challenge.
Oh, for sure. Getting permits, trying to get any kind of government support or resources, that can be a slow, frustrating process anywhere in the world. Lots of red tape.
And what about within the communities themselves? Was everyone on board from the start?
Not necessarily. You have to remember, in many traditional societies, managing resources like water was often seen as men's work.
So there was pushback.
There was initial resistance, women stepping up, taking charge, building things. It challenged established norms. They had to prove themselves, prove their methods worked.
But they did. Their persistence paid off.
It did. The steady, visible results, the returning water, the better crops, that's hard to argue with. Slowly, gradually, they won over the doubters.
So it was a social transformation as much as an environmental one.
Absolutely. Empowering women, shifting dynamics, recognizing their crucial role not just in the home, but in the entire community's well-being.
And this success story, it started to get noticed beyond Karauli.
Yes, the word spread. By 2025, you started seeing similar community-led water projects popping up in other dry districts in Rajasthan, like Barmer and Jaisalmer, directly inspired by the Mahila Jal Biradari model.
So it became a template.
It did. And it also prompted NGOs and even government agencies to take a closer look, leading to new collaborations. People realized this bottom-up approach was incredibly effective.
Did the state government get involved eventually?
Yes, significantly. The Rajasthan government launched its own statewide water conservation program in 2023. And importantly, they explicitly incorporated lessons and strategies learned from the women in Karauli.
That's real recognition. And wasn't there even a Bollywood film?
There was. In 2024, imagine their story reaching a massive national audience through popular cinema. That's quite something.
And international recognition, too.
Yes, the UN highlighted their work in a 2021 report on community water management. They pointed to Karauli as an innovative, replicable model for other water-scarce regions globally.
Which is so relevant now, isn't it? With climate change making water stress an increasing reality everywhere.
Critically relevant. Karauli shows us that effective solutions don't always have to be these massive, expensive, top-down engineering projects.
Right. Sometimes the most powerful solutions are low-cost, community-driven, rooted in local knowledge.
Exactly. And in a country like India, where, the official estimates say around 600 million people face significant water stress,
600 million.
the Karauli story isn't just inspiring, it's a vital blueprint. It shows the immense potential within communities to tackle even what seem like impossible problems.
There are those great little stories, too, anecdotes that capture their spirit.
Yeah.
Like the one about Radha Devi and the grumpy elder.
Oh yeah, that's a classic. Apparently in a meeting, some old guy was complaining about women playing in the mud.
Dismissively, I imagine.
Totally. And Radha Devi just fired back something like, "Better we play in the mud to get water and food than you men play with guns."
Ha ha ha. Perfect. Shows that sharp wit and conviction.
Absolutely. And then there's the slightly funnier one, the Great Goat Incident.
What happened there?
Apparently, a whole herd of goats managed to get themselves stuck inside a newly built johad.
Oh, no.
And all the women had to work together for hours to rescue these panicked goats. But instead of it being a disaster, it turned into this moment of, shared struggle, laughter, and community bonding. It just reinforced their solidarity.
Love it. So what's next for the Mahila Jalbiradari? Are they still active?
Very much so. They're not stopping. They have ambitious goals like training thousands more women. I think the target is 5,000 more by 2027 in water management.
Expanding their reach and expertise.
Exactly. And they're also looking at integrating things like solar pumps, making water access even more sustainable, and focusing more on soil health, improving soil management to help retain water even better.
It's ongoing evolution.
It really is. They're constantly adapting and building on their success.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the main takeaway for you? What should people really hold on to from this story?
For me, it's just the undeniable power of collective action. How a group of determined people, often those without formal power, can achieve truly transformative change, using their own ingenuity and local knowledge.
And it challenges that feeling of helplessness that can creep in when we face huge problems like water scarcity or climate change.
Absolutely. It shows that potential often lies untapped within communities themselves. Maybe the answers aren't always out there with experts, but right here with the people most affected.
So the final thought for you, listening, might be, where do you see that potential in your own community? How could principles like local initiative, perseverance, and community collaboration be applied to challenges you see around you?
Because Karauli proves it, doesn't it? Even the most daunting problems can be tackled when people come together with determination and a belief in their own power to make a difference.